Love is in the air. Everywhere I look around.
We have a real treat. In this interview, we get to speak with the lovely and multi-talented Stella Anna Sonnenbaum. Stella, tell us a little bit about what you do in the world to help people.
Hey, thank you, Davian. So I'm a somatic sexologist, and so a lot of people ask me, so what is the somatic of it? Because sexologists are usually researchers or people who are kind of like psychologists with the sexology aspect of it. And so somatic means body. And so I work with touch with people. So it works like that people come to see me with kind of sexual issues or relationship issues. And we would obviously like have a talking aspect, but it would also involve touch. So I'm very lucky that different from the sexologists who must not touch at all or psychotherapists, I'm able to work with touch and it's very effective. So it's much more effective if people have these kind of body epiphanies, or if they really experience with their bodies what, for example, an orgasm could be like, because if people have never had an orgasm, it's very tricky to get to that, like via talking therapy. And so it makes it much easier if I can touch. So the touch is one way only, and I'm fully dressed, but the clients can be naked. So if that's part of our plan together, so it's client-centered really. So, yeah, that's
Wow,
me.
what a fun job you have.
Yes, isn't it just? Yeah, yeah. Ah,
Well, I know that you're familiar with all the pitfalls of relationship and on the road to relationship. You know, people who are single want to be in a relationship, and a
mhm,
lot of times it comes back to self-love. The pitfalls that we
mhm,
experience are a lack of self-love and pointing us toward greater self-love. So I'm really curious what you have to say about that. What are some of your insights about the role of self-love in relationship to another?
mhm, mhm. Well, a lot of people end up in kind of codependent relationships. And codependent means that I need you because I really need you, because I can't exist by myself without you. And so that you give me something that I'm lacking. And a kind of like better way to relate is from a kind of abundance of like what we are in our core and as human beings, and kind of like sharing this abundance rather than relating out of a kind of like lack and looking for something that we need. And so I think it was Lazarus who said, I can live by myself, for myself, but I prefer to need you. So that's the kind of like difference, as in like, of course we need each other when we're in a relationship, and we get used, we love each other, and you know, it's a beautiful aspect, this needing, but the needing out of neediness is something very different, comes of lack and not of abundance.
Yeah, it's almost like it's coming out of unconsciousness, whereas it's a conscious choice to say, I like to need you. I want to
Yeah,
need you.
exactly, exactly.
The difference is awareness.
Hmm. And it doesn't have to be cold relationships. So it doesn't mean that like I'm self-sufficient and I can be by myself and I don't need you. It's not really like that. So it can be emotionally very closed. However, a lot of people relate with a kind of armor around them, so they cannot really show themselves vulnerable because they haven't got the self-confidence to be able to say no, for example. And so if we are not able to say no, then we can't really allow anybody to come near us. I also facilitate cuddle parties. And so in cuddle parties, we have like an intro bit where we practice to say no, because it's so difficult for a lot of people, because we like to please. And so we make apologies. Um, we say yes, but, or we say maybe later. However, any one of those, if I had told them, okay, so the rule for this cuddle party is when you come in, you have to say yes to everything. So nobody would really come, it's not safe. And so we can only allow ourselves to come near, to come emotionally close when we actually can say no, and we can love ourselves enough to say, okay, this is enough, and now I need to kind of like retreat and be there for myself only. If we don't have that option, because we feel we can't say no, it's too risky to come really emotionally close to people. That's my conviction.
Wow, it's really deep. I was just thinking that we do this all the time. Like, well, not all of us, but many people are taught to manage other people's emotions. So we don't say no because we're afraid of what the other person will think. Oh, we don't want to offend them. We don't want to hurt their feelings. I mean, this is true for anything. It could be in business or in everyday life.
Mm-hmm.
If you're used to taking care of other people and not really taking care of your own needs, and that's where you get away from your self-love, because it's self-loving to say no to things, and to withstand the reaction. If somebody doesn't like you saying no, you have to be okay with that, and you can learn to be loving towards them regardless. Even if you're getting a negative reaction, you're standing behind yourself first.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And what you say is like if you say no to something, it's a yes to something else.
Good point.
So if you say no to your friend, say, okay, do you want to come out tonight? Because you may be tired, you want to stay home. So it's a yes to yourself and to your need to actually stay in with a book or something. And also the no is a way, is useful information. For example, someone asks you, "Is it Monday today?" And you say, "No, it's Tuesday." You wouldn't feel bad about like giving them that information and saying no. And also, when we really dare to be clear with each other and to say, I don't like that, and then they can try something else. So we give them information to navigate their world, and so in a way we respect them by saying no. So we just assume that they can somehow deal with our no, rather than kind of thinking, oh, they may be offended. We just treat them as adults who can deal with both yeses and nos. So it's a question of respect, really. Yeah,
Yeah, it's actually a more loving response to let them manage their own emotions and
exactly.
not treat them
We
like
are
a
adults.
child. Yeah. But
Yeah, exactly.
a lot of women fall into that trap, especially women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially women, including me. I'm Libra, yeah.
Indecisive sometimes.
Indecisive all the time, and also very much liking to please people.
Mm-hmm.
And my issue is sometimes, okay, well, what do I actually want? Or how do I feel about that? So to become clear about that, first of all. And so I'm still on a learning curve with that, but I just realize how important it is and how people love it when we are really clear with them. Because else they don't really know how to relate to us if we are not really clear and show ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
If we are not, it's also this kind of nose. It's like communicating how I am and how I feel. So if I don't give that to them, how are they going to relate to me if I don't let them know what I like and what I don't like?
Yeah, it's like when you're demonstrating self-love, you're signing a permission slip for everyone around you to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they don't pick up that permission slip right away, but it's there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You're setting
So if
an
I'm
example.
allowed to say no, you need to give the same
Right. It's not a
right to
double
them. Yeah.
standard.
No, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Um, there, sometimes people don't develop so some people just live in their heads, and they kind of live in the future and in the past, or in their thoughts, and they never really arrive in the moment. And that also makes it difficult to relate to them. It's kind of living in their heads but not in their body. Um, and Also, they are very much like outcome oriented and not very process oriented. And so if we say yes or no to something, that may change. So I may say yes to something now and no like a second or something later. And so it's not about like us saying yes or no, it's not like signing a contract at all. And if people live in their heads and they haven't really discovered the kind of ability to be in the moment, to be in their bodies at any moment, that is very difficult, and so often they lack a kind of self-confidence that comes out of the inability of being in the moment. I don't know if I make myself clear here.
Yeah, it's like developing trust in yourself. And when you don't have that, you make rules that just set you up. You make beliefs or walls around you. You just make rules that you don't have to reconsider. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm always this way. I always do things this way, and then you're done. So
Mm-hmm.
if you want to, you know, become more in the moment and have more fun and really live your life, you have to throw all that stuff away and give yourself permission to change each moment. And your
Mm-hmm.
definitions of yourself, you can throw them out the window. You know, you can say, well, I'm
Exactly.
always been this way. This is who I am. You can just say, screw it. I can be
Mm-hmm.
whoever I want to be. It's really freeing. I mean, that's very difficult for some people, I understand, but what a liberating thing to give yourself, you know, carte blanche to do that, to reinvent yourself.
I think what you're saying is exactly right, because I think we are telling ourselves stories about ourselves, and that is kind of living in our head. And so we kind of need to affirm the stories from the outside all the time. And so I think a lot of people lack genuine self-confidence um, because they live in the stories in their heads. So the stories from the past, or the stories what they're going to achieve in the future, that like success and happiness is just around the corner. They just need this and that, and they are looking to the outside world to be affirmed, to be reaffirmed in their beliefs. Um, Whereas the kind of genuine confidence that we all have is very much based in the body. So I think if people are not in their bodies, they can't really be in the moment, and they they have no resilience against any crisis. They have very few coping strategies if people are critical towards them, or if shit happens, and shit happens in life. And so they are very poor at self-regulating because they very much rely on the outside world to confirm the stories that they have about themselves. And so that's what I deal with a lot in my practice, is how to get people out of their head and into their bodies, and how to uh, get communication going again between the mind and the heart, and the mind and the genitals, and the heart and the genitals. So a lot of people have very strong divides there, that they are either
Yeah.
not aware of it, or the kind of communication between, they're trying to control the genitals. That's often the case with men, and performance issues, that they're trying to control too much. And
It seems to underline the importance of being grounded
mhm,
energetically in the body. I mean, I think
mhm.
of this in the woo woo sense because that's the field I'm in. You know, in
I
terms of like,
love the woo.
in terms of like the chakra system and the energies there, because the lower chakras are very much all about physical experience, right? Your root chakra is
Mhm,
your survival on the earth, and your
mhm,
second chakra has a lot to do with sex, the sacral chakra, and pleasure and, you know, sensation. And the third chakra is your power chakra. And then, of course, the fourth is the heart, which is a mixing ground for the cosmic that comes down, you know, through the crown, the upper chakras, and those lower chakras. And I see people walking around and you can almost see, I mean, I'm not a clairvoyant per se, I don't see energy, but you can sense when someone is ungrounded, very unbalanced, when they're living entirely in the upper chakras, in the realm of thought. And other people, occasionally you see people who are the opposite, who are very much grounded, but are cut off from their higher wisdom. So I think it's all about bringing it into balance either way. Balance is very good, very important.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Oh, that gets me into another territory, but maybe that's
Okay.
I think a lot of people are trying to settle at some point in their lives. Actually, that gets us into relationship issues, and the kind of the desire to settle often comes at the cost of bringing all the aspects of what we are with us. And so we settle for something. We are settling down maybe with somebody, and so maybe like a lot of aspects of us are satisfied, but there are like one or two that are really suffering. And I feel that when people are trying to settle, it's often at a cost, and the cost is the love for all of us. So the self-love is very much, like you say, the balancing and also bringing of all our aspects into our life, into the world, and into our relationships. So that is actually true self-love, to bring all of us, and not just the easy aspects of us or the things that we feel are accepted by the world, but also the nitty-gritty, the difficult, where we don't seem to fit. I think that's the challenge.
That is so important. And I've relearned that over and over again myself. When you get into a relationship, to not lose aspects of myself. And because I tend to, there's this strong, powerful desire to merge with the other person,
Yes.
And it takes over. And then, years go by and you say, wait a minute, there's something missing from my life that used to be there. What is it? And, once you realize what it is, then that's the time to give yourself permission to get there, to get that back in whatever way it takes. Because sometimes it doesn't involve the other person. And you have to be okay with that. Well, I need this in my life, and that's not what you're about. So I'm going to get it from this other area of life, these other people that I hang out with. Not necessarily sexual. For some people, that's true. But it could be just giving yourself permission to have a life outside of the coupledom.
Yes. And sometimes that takes kind of like a rearranging parameters that we have with our partners. I think it was Esther Perel who said she's been married for so usually people have like 2 or 3 major relationships in their life, major ones, and she said she's had those but with the same husband. And so they seem to have so at some point when there was a crisis, everything had to be renegotiated, and but they are still together. And so I think if it's with the same part, so the good news is that you don't have to separate from your partner. Sometimes it's necessary, but sometimes it takes this kind of like, gosh, we can either separate or we can try to completely look at all the parameters and look at our relationship in a new way. And so in a way, that is that's good news. That's actually possible even with the same person.
That's funny.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Not always, yeah.
Well, it happens on a micro level every day in a relationship, in a way.
True as well.
Yeah, reinventing it. You have to be willing to look. And you have to be willing to look at the parts of yourself that you don't really want to look at, and that's what self-love is about. It's nothing's off limits. Learning to accept all of you, all the parts. And because when you hide it away, when it's left in the realm of unconsciousness, it causes trouble. Because that's where arguments and misunderstandings come in. Because if one partner doesn't like himself, and he's going to project that unhappiness onto his partner or her partner, and it becomes a big mess. So you got to stop the madness if you're in that kind of entanglement, and just start taking care of yourself, lovingly thinking of the other person, but not at the expense of yourself. And that's the most important thing. As it's just like, put your own mask on first before assisting others on the airplane.
Yes, I really love that. Put your own oxygen mask first before helping others. That's very much self-love, yeah, exactly, for anything. And it is actually an act of charity to do that. Because if, I don't know, some people are more on the giving side and some people are more on the taking side. It's natural, and that's how we get our chemistry, maybe. However, if I think the worst thing for me is to be in a relationship and to destroy someone else's life, and they kind of willingly go along with that. It's the worst thought for me. So I think rather worse than me being destroyed myself is like to be in a relationship where I destroy somebody else's life, to really be a bad influence for them. And so I only feel safe when I'm with a person who can actually, where I'm convinced that they can actually look after themselves. Because if they allow me to ruin them, I wouldn't want them to, because I love them. Why would I want that? And so it's really a prerequisite. Self-love is really a prerequisite to be in a healthy relationship.
Wow. Well, that's because you're not a psychopath or a sociopath.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Mm-hmm.
concerned with the other person. There are people out there that are hardcore narcissists that take so much. And it's an interesting topic. I've been studying narcissism for a while now. And because
Mm-hmm.
people think, they think it's excessive self-love, but it's quite the opposite. It's a lack of self-love.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
the narcissist is constantly trying to fill a giant black hole, a bottomless pit, with energy, love from other people, whether that's validation, compliments, trying to extract energy from the outside to fill that gaping wound within. And it doesn't work because it has to be filled by that person. There's no
Yes.
substitute for self-love. You can't gain it from someone else.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so there again we go, like people who are trying to get it from outside of themselves. And yes, and also with narcissists, what's very strong is that they have like a certain image of themselves, and it takes them so much effort to get the acknowledgement for this image that they have of themselves, and everything that does not fit in that image they are violently keeping out, and that's where the violence comes in. And often people who are violent in relationships or emotionally abusive, it's out of fear, out of this need to defend themselves against this challenge. Gosh, I could be somebody completely different than the image of myself that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that crumbles, gosh, I'm somebody completely different than I thought I was. And of course, like in a way, it's kind of life is a process. We are always at hope. It's going to be a surprise and surprise ourselves that we are again somebody different, again somebody different, again somebody different. But it's a kind of process. It's not static.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of realization of like who we are, and then we seem to be somebody else, and we are evolving and developing. And again, so the way to come to acknowledge who we are, which may change, is the body. It's coming back to the body. I want you to talk a little bit about embodiment. Is that all right?
Sure.
Because you would think like we are embodied from the time the two cells merge, and then grow in the womb and so on. But it's actually, there's like different degrees of embodiment, and it does not only differ between individuals, but it also differs in one lifetime. And I was thinking, like when I was 12 or 13, I'm quite tall, and so I had a really growth spurt, and I grew a lot in just 1 year. And you know what teenagers are like when they are very tall, they're really awkward, and they have accidents, and they are immensely unhappy as well because they haven't quite arrived in this changed body. And so definitely at that point I was less embodied than when I was kind of like 7 or when I was 25 or something like that. And so it really varies during a lifetime with the kind of like degree of embodiment or how much we inhabit our body. And this, if we don't fully inhabit our bodies, it's much more difficult to love ourselves. And there's like various tools and techniques in order to kind of like get into the body. And so if you see somebody like walking around and going shopping and driving a car, don't just assume that they are embodied. So it may really vary. It really varies. So from individual to individual as well.
Yeah, you can stop in any supermarket and experience a lot of people who are not in their bodies because they will bump into you. They're unaware of their movements. It
Yeah,
happens all the
yeah,
time. It's amazing.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, a lot of
exactly.
people get into a chronic ungrounded state because of trauma.
Yes.
Something horrible happens as a child. It's your escape mechanism. It makes perfect sense. You want to
Hmm.
leave. You don't want to be there to experience it, and it makes perfect sense. But if it's a lifelong habit, it's worth looking at and reversing and deliberately grounding, whether that's walking on the earth barefoot or whatever methods. I love that you said you cannot fully love yourself, or it's difficult to fully love yourself if you're
Hmm.
not in your body. I think that's
Hmm.
tremendous. That's monumental information.
Hmm. If there's trauma present in the body, then there are places that we don't like to access in our body because the trauma is somewhere held in muscle tension, sometimes often in the belly, and people don't like to go there because it's painful. And so we get again to how much do we bring of ourselves into this life? Do we bring all of ourselves, or do we bring just a part of ourselves? So if we only bring a part of ourselves, we don't love ourselves fully. And so I was teaching mindfulness in a women's shelter, and I did a very simple exercise, which is belly breathing. Now, belly itself has become an obscene word, and so do you find that it's kind of like obscene? Nobody wants to have a belly. People want to, especially women. People want to be a size 0, and they don't want to have anything in their midriff, nothing, 0. Yeah, so belly itself, so belly breathing. So people would already, yeah? And so it's a very simple exercise of just like breathing deeply into the belly and just having the hand on the navel and just like feeling that. And all 12 women said they hated that exercise and they couldn't do it. Now, those
Wow.
women, they were in the women's shelter for a reason. So they had been through traumatic situations, violence at home, and so on. And so if people are like in a kind of traumatic situation, it's often the belly that they can't access very
Mm.
well at all, because that's where the pain sits, where and the funny thing is that actually getting into that pain and getting through that pain will ground them, but it's painful to actually access it. And so a lot of people avoid it all their lives. That's why people breathe in a shallow way. They only breathe in their upper body, in their chest, in order to avoid all these painful aspects that we store.
Yeah. One of my mentors is a clairvoyant energy healer, and she teaches women's classes. And one of the techniques that's really powerful and simple is to put grounding cords on your ovaries, as well as we think of grounding at the base of the spine, the tailbone, but you can ground anything. And for
Mm-hmm.
women, we tend to try to unconsciously, we're trying to heal people. And the belly is where a lot of that energy ends up. We're kind of sponge healers. We're absorbing other people's pain
Ah,
as the nurturer, as the feminine role. And a lot of that stuff ends up in there and it doesn't even belong to us. It might be
okay.
grandmother, grandfather's pain, even. It might be ancestrals. Um, so anything you can do to release from that area, whether it's just visualizing a grounding cord, or breathing, or walking on the earth barefoot, whatever helps, is very powerful.
So how do you imagine the grounding chords?
You just get into a meditative state and you picture a connection, a cord between that ovary and the center of the earth. You go all the way down, and it can be like a tube, or it can even be fun like a silly straw. It can be a tree
Okay.
root, and it's just firmly attached on one end to the organs or the tailbone, whatever you want to attach it to, and imagine it going all the way down to the center of the earth. And then as you breathe, as you exhale, you release energy down that cord. It's a hollow cord or a tube that can accept any energies. And the earth is there to accept it and recycle and clean that energy and return it to you. It's a natural mechanism.
Oh, so the energy comes back up cleansed.
It does. It comes back up through your feet, your foot chakras.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, the
I'm
earth.
sit I'm sitting I'm sitting down at the moment, so I can't entirely do it, but it's wonderful. I just felt all this energy going like all the way through to the center of the earth.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and you can do that with any of the chakras too, especially those lower three chakras. Imagine grounding cords for each one. And sometimes
Hmm.
color coding is good. If you're familiar with the colors, the root chakra is red in color, and the second is orange, and the third is yellow. So you can picture these colored cords coming down and releasing all that
Hmm.
stuff. And
Hmm.
anybody if you do this every day, you're going to see a difference. You feel it right away, but if you have long-standing things, you can start to tune in and see what's going on in there. When I do it, sometimes I could see a blockage, something represented by, like, say, a black spot in an otherwise light area, you know. And you don't have to go into the trauma. That's the thing. You don't have to relive the trauma or revisit the specifics of it. You
Hmm.
can release it without visiting it.
Hmm. Hmm. Wonderful. And so I think a lot of this client, a male client who came to me, and he had been in a traumatic relationship with a heroin addict, and also like a lady who had been abused herself sexually, and people who have been abused. Are sometimes not very open sexually at all. So the sexuality was very traumatic for him. And then the separation was also very traumatic. And in order to kind of boost his self-esteem, he went to see prostitutes for about 2 years on end. And he now has a new relationship. And this new lady doesn't know that he's been seeing prostitutes. And he feels that he's not being able to be really intimate with her. And so he came to see me and asked me, well, how can I be more intimate? And so the reason being is that he hasn't developed self-love, and also that he was traumatized in his previous relationship. And so again, he's like looking for sexual gratification with women in order to boost his ego. Uh, but isn't really able to show himself vulnerable. And in order to be intimate, we need to be able to kind of take that armor off and show ourselves as vulnerable as we are, and risk that we may get hurt. And he was not able to do that. And so with his new girlfriend, he was kind of like seeking sexual gratification, very similar to what he was doing with the prostitutes. And he wasn't, even though he really loved her, he was not able to get to this place of intimacy. And so this is a story about a penis owner. And so I was wondering how do vulva owners, how do we use or abuse our partners or the opposite sex or even same-sex people in order to boost our egos rather than authentically share who we are, what we are. And so for women, that's not sexual gratification because society poo-poos that for women. No?
Mm-hmm.
So like, a sexually promiscuous man is a stud, but a sexually promiscuous woman is a slut. So.
Right.
And so we can't go the same way because society says, And so for women, I think women get their ego boost through other women, because women don't only look at men, they look at other women as well. So this kind of attention, kind of like, oh, she's very glamorous. And also via attention of the other, of the opposite gender, if it's a heterosexual woman. So more via the kind of like attention and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the UK dating coach here, Hayley Quinn, and she had this like TEDx talk, and she talked about her own dating history, and she said, okay, so I would date two men at the same time, and I would like have an ex who was still kind of interested in me, and then I would have one in the freezer. And so kind of creating surroundings for ourselves for our ego boost, rather than showing up authentically and really risking to be with a new lover, with a new partner, and just him, and really risking that it might get wrong. And then also that people go from one relationship directly into the other and don't take time to grieve and sit at home and read a book and have have some chicken soup or something just by themselves. People kind of like replace one guy with the other, women especially, men as well maybe, but women especially. And so she says, Ellie Quinn says, like these days when people ask her for dating advice, she said, you know what? Why don't you stay at home for a few weeks, read a book, do some self-development, so that they can finally be intimate with themselves, because the prerequisite to be intimate with somebody else is that we are intimate with ourselves, first of all. How can we be intimate with somebody else if we don't dare to face our own soul?
Yeah. Learn to love yourself, because you're bringing you with you in the relationship. Don't be so eager to get in a relationship. And it's an ongoing thing. I have that manifesting book, and I have
Yes.
a lot of clients that come to me for mentoring advice to get into alignment and with their mindset, into what they want and attract it through the law of attraction. But it doesn't end there. You meet the man of your dreams, okay, and then you live happily ever after. No, it's an ongoing thing, because you're constantly finding these other layers. You're like an onion, peeling back the layers of yourself, and you're mirroring each other. And some people have asked me, you should write a book, how to live with the man of your dreams once you've found it.
Yes, have you finished that book? Because I'm looking forward to that.
No, I'm still living it. I guess I'll think about it one day.
Working in that field with relationships and with sexuality and being vulnerable ourselves, being in relationships or going through separations, and so it can be painful in that public arena, and to say, I'm not perfect, I learned so much in my last relationship, but now I'm single again. I'm looking for a partner. So that's the case with me at the moment. And so I've just come out of a relationship. And so, phew, here I am, wiser. And another, like you say, another layer peeled off, and not regretting anything. So it was very joyful, very painful. And I sometimes think that life is excavating us out. Emotion-wise, and both for joy and for pain. And so if we just want the one thing, the excavation is not happening. So it seems to be happening like in all aspects. So it's the sheer amount of emotion that we can hold. And I didn't know that. So that's the way of self-discovery, that we find strengths in ourselves that we didn't know we had. And that we find joy that we never knew we were capable of, and pain we never knew we were capable of as well. And people just want the one without the other. Right. And again, we're leaving parts of us out. We're leaving our enormous strengths to feel emotions out. And so I come from Tantra as well. And so how do we live fully? How are we fully alive? How do we bring all of ourselves to the world? And how do we live orgasmically? And so that's people kind of live on a kind of like small scale. Well, it's quite nice, but let's not feel too much. That's often live by that headline. Let's not feel too much because it may be dangerous. But what are we missing out on by keeping ourselves small on a feeling level or on a living level?
What you're saying is absolutely right. I mean, we live in contrast, we live in duality. So we have
Yeah.
to allow all the experiences and all the emotions and not judge them so harshly, just accept it all. Okay, I did that. Okay, I felt this way. Okay, I feel this way right now. And that's what radical self-acceptance is every step of the way. Being just saying okay. Okay. Okay, I'm in a crappy mood. Okay. And not saying I shouldn't be, and just because it'll
Yeah.
move faster if you don't resist it, if you accept it, if you stop judging or looking back at your choices, your romantic history. Oh, I screwed that up. No, just accept it. Okay, that's the way it went. That's as best I could do at the time. And it really is true. I mean, it's a journey. We do the best we can at every step. We're so harsh on ourselves sometimes, the self-talk that goes on. And it's really important to turn that around. I advocate a zero tolerance policy for self-recrimination.
Zero tolerance policy for self-recrimination. I love that. Beautiful.
Yeah.
So what to say about loneliness then? If people say, yeah, but I'm lonely without relationships. I'm lonely without a partner. What do you tell them?
Well, you got to look at it like, well, why are you lonely? Because you're in relationships with lots of people, whether you recognize them as relationships or not. Because you go out on the
Mm-hmm.
street, you're interacting with people. You go to work, you interact with people. But we have this definition of relationship as a special thing. This is one person. This
Mm-hmm.
is the only person who is allowed to know me at this level. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a matter of bringing yourself to the table no matter where you are. Because I had a client who had this situation and she was really longing to be with a man and she was single. And I said, look at what you're doing at work. Look at what goes on in your mind, how you're rejecting yourself in interactions with other people. And that's the answer,
Mm-hmm.
is to love yourself and to be comfortable in your own skin no matter what. And when you start to do that, you won't feel lonely anymore because you're really, when you're lonely, you're really looking for somebody else to come in and validate you. And there's almost 8 billion people on the planet. It doesn't actually make sense to be lonely. There's people all around, but it's a state of mind. It's because you're not really showing yourself to anybody. You feel cut off, but it's your choice. You don't have to.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, you're right about like any relationship can contribute to self-development. For example, I live at the moment in a purpose community here, a small one, and it's wonderful and it's enlightening, and it's wonderful people, and however, it's also very painful because on a daily basis you have mirrors. And
Mm-hmm.
so sometimes it's really easier to be like by myself, to hide away and to not be constantly mirrored.
Mm-hmm.
And it may just be a question of like how self-important do you want to feel? Because obviously the mirror can also be, oh, I have no time for you at the moment. It's kind of like, oh, I'm not important enough. And so that's also just relationships, huh? The kind of oh, they're not taking any notice of me at the moment or so. Just that. Huh? It's and so sometimes it's kind of like really easier to hide away and to not see too many people and so
Yeah,
on.
right.
And so that's quite surprising. It's quite surprising for me. So even with this like very aware and loving people, relationships in itself are joyful and painful. So it doesn't have to be romantic relationships at all.
Yes.
So
We live in a house
mhm,
of mirrors everywhere we go.
exactly, yeah, yeah. Mm. And so people have their reasons to kind of like live by themselves. and, and it is in a way safer, but it is obviously, I mean, loneliness is the big um, epidemic of these days, really, among all ages.
Yeah, it's because we tend not to be intimate, and I don't mean sexually intimate, but emotionally intimate with each other. I mean, we live in these separate houses, and the conversation is very cursory. It's very superficial. Hi, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. You go to the grocery store. How are you? Oh, I'm fine. How are you? And it's robotic. It's not real. People crave a real connection, and it's not socially acceptable in most places. Even though we're
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by people and we could interact with people if they would allow us and we would allow ourselves to do it. That's why the co-housing is a beautiful thing. Anything that brings people together, even things that seem tragic. When people lose their finances and their jobs and they have to move back in with family, that seems tragic. But actually, maybe there's a silver lining, like reconnection. Putting people
Mm-hmm.
back in the same house and talking to each other again.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I mean, ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
everything serves us if we allow it, if we stop resisting.
Because I'm a sexologist, I would also say that people need to be sensual with themselves, sensual and sexual if they like with themselves. And so when people touch their own genitals, it is often perceived as masturbation, but it doesn't need to be. So it's just like a matter of like touching the skin everywhere, including the genitals, to just like touch base. And I would recommend that at least once a day, kind of like either going to sleep or waking up, to just like touch and to touch the genitals also, just like coming back, and it's pleasurable, and it doesn't have to go into masturbation. If people want to masturbate, that's fine too. And then also what I recommend, people think I'm mad, is like saying sweet things to ourselves and giving ourselves hugs. I try to I try to do that with the women in the shelter, and I think they thought I was mad.
We're ready
And
for that.
so I don't know. I was so you give yourself a sweet hug. Shall I demonstrate that?
Sure.
Yeah. And so you say, and then you say, I love you, and you say your own name. So you say, I would say, I love you, Stella. And so this kind of keeping us safe and being gentle and loving with ourselves. Um, and if people watch themselves on a day-to-day basis, they have like a very harsh commander living in their heads often. Do this, what are you doing? Oh, you're distracting yourself, and you should be doing this rather. And so it's this kind of language they usually have rather than darling to ourselves. And so just being mindful of that, and being gentle and loving with ourselves. We kind of rely on other people to do that to us. But first of all, yeah, it's ourselves who are precious. And so we could say to ourselves, what would I do without you? It's true. What would we do without us, ourselves?
That's wonderful.
Mm.
It reminds me of the classic Louise Hay. She would have people look in the mirror and say, "I love you, Louise,"
It's
and
true,
the
yeah, yeah.
confrontation of a mirror, and yeah,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
anything you can say that's in that direction is good. It's powerful.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, yeah,
Thank you for that. So, if anyone watching might like to get a hold of you and see what you're up to and avail
yeah.
themselves of your services, where would they find you?
Yes, you can come to my website, which is stellawithlove.com. And so I am based in London, but I do offer Skype sessions as well. And but if you're in London, please contact me. So I offer like a 20-minute free Skype or phone consultation for any new client.
Fantastic.
Yes, and I do single sessions and sessions for couples, and also workshops and cuddle parties.
Lovely. All right.
Mm,
Well, thank you so much. This has been really inspiring and enlightening.
thank you, Debbie. Same here.